Take your business.
What did happen to Elvis? It was one of the great unanswered mysteries of our time. Did he die on the bathroom, on the toilet in Graceland? No. There's no way that that could have really happened. I was in a bookstore in Hollywood, and I came across this new collection of Joe Lansdale short stories, and there, right on the dust jacket, it said, Elvis Battles Mummy. And that just spoke to me. I just thought that in a capsulated form, that was probably about the greatest concept I'd ever read. The only difficulty that I had in getting the rights from Joe Lansdale was his surprise that I wanted to make a film out of it. Because he, a lot of people, very well-known directors had been circling around Joe's work. I mean, I know David Lynch and some other directors had his material under option at different times. And yet, from Joe's point of view, this was the absolute last of his stories that he ever thought anyone would try to make a movie about.
How could I have gone from the king of rock and roll to this? Old guy in a rest home in East Texas with a growth on his pecker.
The adaptation of Joe Lansdale's story was actually pretty easy. The story was written in a fairly cinematic style. The other thing that was nice about it was that it was a 40-page short story, which I think is eminently more translatable than a 400-page novel. With a novel, you have to cut out so much material that frequently you find that the writers end up eviscerating the source. Yet I found that working with a 40-page, it was just about the right length. It wasn't quite long enough, and so I added a few extra sequences. Some of the scenes that I created was the scene where Elvis and Sebastian Haff traded places, because I really wanted to go into more detail, because that was one of the most interesting parts of the story that I liked. And I was such a great fan of the old classics like The Prince and the Pauper, where you would have the king who would switch places with a commoner and then go out as a commoner.
Oh my God.
Very interesting story as to how Bruce Campbell became involved in Bubba Ho-Tep. And it's a true story, actually, which is I came back to my office one day, and there was a message on my phone machine from Sam Raimi, the eminently great director of Spider-Man and some other really cool films. And I had known Sam for a number of years and hadn't spoken with him for a while. And it was a message from his assistant inviting me to a sneak preview. No, actually, it wasn't a sneak preview. It was a retrospective screening that Sam was hosting of Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I never knew that Sam was a geek for Spielberg. So it surprised me, but I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And I called the number, and the number was his office, and his assistant came on. I said, oh, I'm calling to RSVP for the screening that Sam invited me to. He goes, well, we're not having any screening. What are you talking about? I said, well, I got this thing. Let me go talk to Sam. So Sam comes on the line, and he says, Don, somebody's pulling a joke on you. I'm not having any screening. So we had a good laugh about that. It was kind of fun, but it got us talking. And so we're talking about things. What are you working on? What am I working on? And I said, well, I just gotten this short story. It's Elvis fighting a mummy. It really is fun. I think it's going to be a cool movie. And he says, you should get Bruce Campbell. He's a great actor. I'll have him call you. So about 20 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's Bruce. And he goes, hey, what's this about this Elvis fighting a mummy movie? I go, oh, well, yeah, I'm making it. And he says, we should talk about it. So Bruce and I got together, and we went out and had a meal. And, looking at him, he looks not too far from Elvis. I mean, I was really struck by how handsome he was. He had the dark hair, and I just thought that he might make a hell of an Elvis. And ultimately then did decide to go that direction. And truthfully, the casting of Bruce Campbell in Bubba Ho-Tep was based on a prank phone call made by someone out there. You know who you are, and I don't. But I didn't know much about Bruce. Probably in 1991, a number of years ago, I went to a horror genre convention, and Bruce Campbell was there to present an award. And he came onto the stage, and he did his stunt from Evil Dead 2, where he takes his hand and puts it around behind his head and flips himself 360 degrees and does a pratfall on the stage. You should have seen this audience. They went nuts over him. There was a bond, because here you have this genre star who will come out on stage and risk his life for the 200 or 300 fans out there. And they loved it, and they appreciate it, and they respect him for it. And I'm thinking, this is weird, because this was before the Army of Darkness superstardom that he had. I was seeing him create this bond with audiences, and it struck me, and I never forgot that. And I think that might have been it. When Sam Raimi mentioned to me about Bruce, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'll talk to him someday. It was more like, oh, I should talk to him, because he's that guy that has that connection.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I could see that Bruce really had a handle on this. It started early on when we were first working, and he would do some riffs on the character, and I'll tell you, it was hilarious, because it got me laughing. You know, he was doing the "hey baby" kind of thing.
Well, we use what we got, baby.
Then it was when we actually started shooting, and I could see that there was a depth to the performance, that Bruce was really going to be able to make this.
Man, if I could just talk to her again. Tell her I love her. Trying to make things right somehow.
From a director's point of view, that's probably the most exciting moment, because no one else has seen it yet. No one else knows. You're the first audience who watches that performance, and when it's great, like Bruce's is in this film, it's like you just won the lottery, or you hit the jackpot. It's like, wow, all this work might actually pay off. We might have a good movie here.
Just another freak. Let's split.
And then, of course, once that we had Bruce Campbell on board, I really felt that we needed a signature action scene that would satisfy those rabid Evil Dead fans out there. And so I concocted this scarab beetle concept.
That is one big bitch cockroach.
Yeah, I've got a thing about insects, there's no question. And you know, in the original Phantasm, there's an elaborate sequence with this alien insect from hell that the brothers have to kill. And it was just a natural, because you know, they're mummies, and what goes best with mummies? Scarab beetles. They're an integral part of the Egyptian folklore.
Hot damn!
Yeah, the scarab beetle scene was entirely analog, if you will. We didn't really have the kind of budget where we could afford a lot of digital effects, and I'm not sure that it would have helped if we had them, because you know, sometimes creatures can be very hard to realize digitally. But Kerry Pryor is the fellow who had actually worked on Phantasm 3 and Phantasm 4, created some of the really intricate models for the ball and the sphere sequences. And I talked to Kerry early on about coming on and helping me with this scarab beetle, and he really got enthused by it, and he went down to the museums and started studying the structures. And he built about 7 different models, because each one could do a different, you know, one had wings that would fly, and one would crawl, and another one, you could actually had it on a string, and you could pop it, and it would jump up and scare. And so he created a little factory and popped out a bunch of different molds of these bugs. And they look pretty good. And the other nice part about it is it gave something tangible, physical for Bruce to work with.
Even a big bitch cockroach like you should know. Never, but never fuck with the king.
I think why I like this story was the fact that you have these 2 old guys who are stuck here. Nobody cares about them anymore. Nobody's thinking about them. Nobody's talking. They were legends and icons at one time, and now they're nobodies. And yet the 2 of them develop a friendship and a respect for one another, and then ultimately have to stand up and be counted.
Ask not what your rest home can do for you. Ask what you can do for your rest home.
Hey, you're copying my best lines.
Well, there's no question that the original Phantasm and the inspiration for it was a way for me to work out my own feelings about the way we handle death in America. There's definitely a parallel with Bubba Ho-Tep, because rather than focusing on death so much in Bubba Ho-Tep, I was able to investigate how we deal with our old people in America, because it's not a very pretty sight, what we do, the way that we warehouse the old folks.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of life this old guy had?
Huh?
What kind of life he had? You know, his kids, his grandkids, his legacy. Look at him now.
Oh, who gives a shit?
Early on, when we were trying to get funding, we got a lot of criticism because nobody believed that a young person would want to sit for 90 minutes and watch two old geezers in a rest home. So this was a genuine and very satisfying surprise for both of us. The other thing, on the other hand, what's interesting, in the first, one of the first screenings that we had at a film festival was that at least 50% of the audience was 60 or older. And we got some of the most generous praise from this component of the audience. And so, in a really weird, strange way, I think we've managed to make a crossover film.
You treat me like a baby again, I'll wrap this goddamn walker right around your head.
We were lucky enough to have the KNB Effects studio who had created the old folks, the old makeup on Bruce, and the design of it was fantastic. It certainly took us a number of days to fine-tune it. If you look at the film, I'm not going to give it away, but you know, some of the first couple of days aren't as good as they were at the end of the film. But interesting idea and concept that Bruce actually came up with that we all carried as our mantra, which was that the old makeup needed to be treated as if it was an aging starlet. So when we brought Bruce onto the set, we needed to have conceived the lighting and the production design to service the makeup. You know, so what that meant is, if we were going to go out in the bright sunlight, we had to be very careful to be sure that he was possibly tree shaded, keeping the light dim, and you know, focusing on the strengths of the makeup. Since he was in character all day long and in the makeup, we got to spend 30, 35 days with old Elvis. I mean, it wasn't just the 2 hours of the movie. You'd have lunch with old Elvis, and you'd hang around on the set, and you'd see him come walking down, shuffling on his way to the set, and he'd be going, "Hey, baby, that's cool. Thank you very much, man." I mean, that's the way he was all the time, so it was just a hoot for us.
Don't make me use my stuff on you, baby.
Well, I had worked with Bob Ivy, the stuntman on both Phantasm 3 and Phantasm 4, and Bob is a really different kind of stuntman, because most stuntmen, they show up, they're all about the money and the glory, and very few of them are sci-fi or horror fans, and Bob's a big fan of those films.
Come and get it, you undead sack of shit.
He was really excited because, in addition to being a Phantasm fan, he's a gigantic Boris Karloff geek too. And so the idea that he could have an opportunity to play a role that Karloff had once played of a mummy, you know, was really appealing to Bob. And so he started dieting from the minute I told him about it. And he got pretty thin, so he was able to fit into that suit and, you know, make it, you know, authentically look like he was desiccated. He's a mummy from Texas, and there was some expository dialogue earlier in some other versions that ultimately we cut out. Probably should have left in, that told a little more of the backstory, being that the reason that the mummy had a focus on these cowboy clothes is that he was in Texas, so he wanted to fit in, so he managed to steal the clothes off of one of the corpses on the submerged bus, and that's how he got his cowboy outfit. Well, not being able to license any real Elvis songs was a blow, but one of the joys of low-budget filmmaking is searching for roots and roots around the problem, trying to figure out how you can accomplish what you want on the limited resources that you had. Bruce was pretty honest up front. He said, "Look, I can't sing, so maybe it's good that you don't have any Elvis songs. And I guess it did work out okay, because he can move, you know, he's got the mojo, but he just doesn't have the pipes. So what we decided was, well, we can't have him sing. Let's take every one of these signature moves and work it into a montage.
Well, then I had the accident. I was gyrating, see, taking care of business, and then my hip went out. I've been having trouble with it.
One of the benefits of controlling the way a movie's made is the post-production schedule. We spent, for the better part of a year, editing Bubba Ho-Tep, and I really think that was time well spent. And also, we had the luxury of having some money in the budget for some additional photography. We always knew that we'd be able to shoot for maybe a few days or a week just to flesh it out. And so all of the effect sequences that had problems, we were able to do any little connective shots that were needed. So that was really a luxury. There were a couple of scenes that we shot after the film was done, we came back and fixed. The entire sequence where the nurse goes out and smokes a cigarette out in the back porch and is threatened by the mummy was filmed during this post-production phase. Decided that we needed a little more mummy threat and explain how the mummy gets into the rest home. Another thing that we expanded on completely, and which is kind of fun to go back and watch the DVD, is the fight scene with Elvis on the wheelchair.
Come on, Bubby. Here we go.
We have this apocalyptic fight to the death between the mummy and Elvis as they're riding on the wheelchair flying towards the cliff. We had shot some sections of that, but we really didn't have the punching or the karate chop and all that stuff. So unfortunately Bruce wasn't available, so if you go back you can watch it and you can figure out which of the shots. We brought his stuntman back, and this, you know, stuntman's the guy who's doing the punching, and we got a nice slobber knocker fight there. There's a lot of third-party exposition in Joe's story that had a really interesting and very cool point of view. I needed to find a way to get that into the film. And I had started off with the idea that I would have a third-party narrator throughout the film. And I was going to get this old country-style gentleman who would narrate the entire film.
Elvis knew full well that Jack might not want to see him. Sometimes Jack accepted Elvis as the real Elvis. And when he did, he got scared.
And I had that for a number of months in my edit, and it didn't quite work. There was also some sections where Elvis had an inner voice, which was working pretty well. And so as each month of editing dragged by, I was cutting out the narrator, and I was going to more of Elvis. And then finally, I had Bruce in and just had him track the whole thing. And this solved one of the key structural problems for the film.
Now it's time. Time to be a little of what I'd always fantasized being. A hero.
The movie starts off with some, it's actually authentic German newsreel footage that we bought from a stock library. And for the German speakers out there, if you go through and you listen, you'll see that the translation of the actual voiceover is not correct. We enhanced it dramatically a little bit. Well, actually, the hieroglyphic subtitles were in the original short story. And so we just followed them. They might be phonetically correct, but they're not authentic Egyptian hieroglyphs, to say the least. That might be something that you have to get the joke. You got to go back and do a freeze frame and take a look at those things. Well, the idea of a sequel to Bubba Ho-Tep started off as a joke because I wanted to have a tag to end the movie with. So we put that in there. It started off as a joke, but the response to the film has just been so overwhelming, and people just genuinely appreciate and like the film that I think the odds are really good that there actually will be a sequel.
Do we know what the hell we're doing, man?
But we're still formulating the plan, but we got a lot of ideas. Certainly want to do some extended sequences with young Elvis, and you know, who knows? He might have gone down to New Orleans to shoot a movie, and maybe we could actually film a production number from an Elvis movie starring Bruce Campbell. Wouldn't that be cool?
Let's do it, amigo.